The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live.
Great things, my fellow warriors, about Meckanimal, and today we're going to discuss the topic of weighted calisthenics on the rings. We have one of our fellow warriors who asked last time in the comments whether or not what I think, my insights are on weighted calisthenics on the rings. And what I would say is, as a general rule, I would not advise it to the general public. You know, like there are plenty of exercise already challenging on the rings that you should not need to resort to adding some extra load on the classic calisthenics movement, like the deep or the ring, to be able to achieve the results needed from the conventional calisthenics on either the high parallel bars or on a high pull-up bar. However, it can be useful. The only problem I see is that the risk and two factors to be noticed. And the first is that even for a higher level practitioners, the benefits doesn't. The benefit you get from doing the weighted calisthenics on the ring is not usually justifying the risk you might take to and injure yourself in the process. Even advanced people could get injured easily from overworking, right? So you need to be smart about how you set up your program, even when you're advanced and you incorporate the weighted calisthenics on the rings, especially the deeps, right? When it comes down to the pull-ups are pretty straightforward. You just have to pull. If anything, it tends to make it easier on the wrist whenever you are doing weighted pull-ups with the rings. So the main movements that I'm addressing in this video will be the dips, because that would tend to be the more complex movement out of the two, out of the pull-up and the dip, that you can do on the rings. So yeah, for the weighted dip on the rings, you have to be careful how you do it and when to apply it, and why you're applying it should be the question. So the benefit, for example, that I find is in using it in a conjugate method, like I'm doing right now, the conjugate style, where you have different variation of a movement that you can use to exert maximal force during the session. And I happen to rotate, and sometimes I hit the weighted deep on the ring. But my goal is not to be able to set up like a PR, an ultimate PR on the weighted dip on the rings. Is not a movement that I'm aspiring to excel at. It's just a tool that I'm using to circumvent the law of accommodation, you know, to reach a higher PR on the conventional dip. So that's one way you can use the weighted calisthenics on the ring, for example, in attempt to find a good variation that you can use, so you can avoid overuse, and you can avoid you can circumvent the biological law of accommodation and keep making progress. The second use that I can find is if you happen not to have you happen to be stranded somewhere and you only happen to have rings, and on top of that you have some bunch of plates out there laying there that you can make good use of. So why not doing some weighted calisthenics on the ring? In that case, for example, it will make sense because you have no other tools than the rings and the plates. That's one way I can find it useful, because if you know what you're doing, it will not harm you at all if you pay attention to your cues and you avoid any type of strain. The problem is most people who will be practicing calisthenics will be beginners and intermediate, and the type of people who would like to overuse the weights out of ego will be beginners and intermediate. So that's why I tend to discourage the use of weighted calisthenics on the rings. Other than that, when you're mindful of what you're doing, it should not be an issue. You should be able to cruise safely through it. Another use of it will be what else? When you're using, you're adding some weight on some gymnastic skills, for example, like the iron cross. You want to work on some cross fly negatives, some cross pull negatives, stuff like that, and you feel the need to add some weighted vest, add some plates on yourself, or some ankle weights, any type of external load that you want to add to increase the load and force your body to work harder and adapt. I guess it's safe to call it weighted calisthenics, even though it doesn't. In this case, the movement involved are not part of the conventional calisthenics movements: dips, pull up, push-ups, stuff like that. It could be just some gymnastic movements to which you're adding some external load. Then we call it weighted calisthenics. In this case, yes, I can find good use of weighted calisthenics on the rings. So I think that's about that. That's about how you could use weighted calisthenics and in a smart manner, make good use of it, and still in a way that you progress in the conventional movement. So I think I made it clear, right? Yeah. So let's sum it up a little bit. So the question was, can you use what I think about the use of weighted calisthenics? The answer resides in the gray area. So it's a yes and a no. As a general rule, I would discourage people to get into weighted calisthenics on the rings. There are plenty of potential already on the conventional weighted calisthenics on stable surfaces, and the idea to add an element of instability will just make it hard for you unnecessarily to exert maximal effort. So for that alone, I would just suggest you to stick to stable surfaces. Now, because if you want to really strain and work on intensity, there are plenty of gymnastic strength movement that you can use by altering your leverages on the ring to get the workout that you need without adding some unnecessary risk of injuries with extra plates on you. So that's that. So beside that, you can use it as a variation of a movement that you need to include in a training style, like the conjugate method, where you have a different variation of a typical movement that you're working on that you want to excel at. And yeah, you can use the ring variation of it, for example, to circumvent some accommodation. Some law of accommodation, and keep making progress, right? I did that for the weighted rings so far, And the interesting thing is that I've been consistent by I've been consistently reading a specific ratio of and a correlation between my weighted dip on the ring and my weighted dip on a stable surface on the P-bar, and it tends to be about 60% of my max PR on the rings. So whenever I hit a number, I can estimate what my PR on the P-bar will be. So that's one good, that's one benefit, I guess, from using the weighted dip on the rings while I'm rotating and waiting for the turn of the shred ball. At least I can have an idea. And so far, I've been hitting on that. It tends to be about 60% of the maximum that I can do on a stable surface. So that's the one of the main use of weighted dips on the rings. In addition to the fact that you can use that for some accessory work on using some gymnastic movement on the ring, we could call those as well weighted calisthenics, like I mentioned earlier. And the last resort to using them would be if you are stranded somewhere where you don't have a pull-up ball and a deep ball, two deep bars, and the only way you can exercise is to hang the rings, and you happen to have some plates there, or maybe tree trunks that you wanna, and a belt. I know it will happen. It will be and like it will be an odd situation, right, where you have all this thing set up perfectly where you need to do to resort to the weighted calisthenics, because in most cases you will have just the ring and your body weight, so just work with your body weight. But if you happen to be able to use external load and you have some plate there by mistake, somebody threw it there, or in the house where you are, you have those plate there, you have a belt, but you don't have a ball and you don't have two deep bars. So yeah, feel free to get on some weighted calisthenics. Just be careful, man. That's all I can say. It would not be my first choice for strength training. Weighted calisthenics on rings, too complicated. Just stick to classic calisthenics, because I've seen elite athletes pulling high numbers, and not one time they resort to using weighted calisthenics on the rings. So I will believe that is not really needed to achieve greatness in weighted calisthenics. It could be a tool that needs to be used wisely. So that's about it. Feel free to comment. Let us know about your experience with weighted calisthenics on the rings. If you happen to be one of those that have been doing that longer than the rest of us and have found specific benefits from it, let us know and share with us your story. We can never cease to learn. We are learning in this long journey of strength training. So that's it. Everything is and will always be the Meckanimal way, the natural way, the holistic way. Peace. Like, comment, and please subscribe, share the message. We need the algorithm to be on our side. Salute.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live.